The Minnesota Vikings pulled out a 36-28 win over the Pittsburgh Steelers on Thursday Night Football. The Steelers dropped to 6-1, while the Vikings improved to 6-7 and improved their playoff chances dramatically. The Vikings squandered a 29-0 lead in the second half, and they went into the half leading 23-0 with over 300 yards of offense and limiting the Steelers to only 66 yards. They were on a roll. Dalvin Cook was, cooking. Kirk Cousins wasn't great, but he got the job done, and Ben Roethlisberger was being sacked. He had nowhere to go with the football, and he was given no time by his offensive line. There's one point, believe it was towards the end of the half, Eric Kendricks came unblocked, sacked Roethlisberger. He headed to the sideline. He yelled at Mike Tomlin. He was very frustrated with how things were going. He was given no time. However, a lot of this has to fall on Roethlisberger. He's basically a tree. He has no mobility, and that led to a lot of sacks. Actually, on the night, he was sacked 5 times and hit 7 times. So not a great offensive line performance for the Steelers, or also from him throwing the ball away. So Roethlisberger, towards the end of the game, got them back in it. Down the stretch, this Vikings were outscored 28-7, making it a 36-28 game. The Steelers had a chance to get back in the game and tie it. Roethlisberger hit Pat Freiermuth, the tight end, perfectly. The best place he could put it. There was nobody else open. Freiermuth caught it. He had it in his hands. Harrison Smith made a great play, knocked the ball out of his hand to end the game on the last play. So to break down this drive, really, it was a lot of checkdowns, and somehow the Steelers were able to get out of bounds on them. Obviously, playing Roethlisberger, he's not throwing over 20 yards most of the time, and I'm surprised that the Vikings played so conservatively, considering Roethlisberger is only going to check down. One of the biggest things that happened on that last drive, other than the Pat Freiermuth drop touchdown, was Chase Claypool. This man had an up and down night. He started out with a personal foul on the first drive of the game, and then a missed block on 3rd and 1, which caused them to go 3 and out, I believe. And he was then benched for this, and then he had a pretty solid game, actually, 8 catches, 93 yards, but on the last drive, he got a first down from Ben Roethlisberger, and this was hilarious. It's only a 10-yard catch, and then he starts celebrating, pointing, first down, but they have no timeouts left, and there's only 34 seconds, and he's celebrating, and then he actually wastes, I believe, about 10 seconds of their time. Rather than taking the ball and giving it to the ref, he just starts celebrating. Nobody knows why, but I'm sure he'll be disciplined for this action, especially for a team that struggled with a lot of distractions from teammates such as Juju's TikToks and other Antonio Brown antics that have occurred. Roethlisberger wasn't great on the night. The first half was awful from him, but he somewhat turned it around. He finished 28 of 40, 308 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. The interception was really bad. He just was trying to force a sidearm throw because of how everything was going. He didn't want to take a sack. He didn't want to throw the ball away, especially on 3rd down. Chucked it, got picked off, and he was very frustrated after that. Najee Harris, this man continues to be the only bright spot for the Steelers offense this year. He finished with 20 carries for 94 yards behind an abysmal offensive line. He's just a spark plug. He really runs this offense, especially when Roethlisberger leaves next year. The offense is going to be in pretty good hands, especially if they can fix this offensive line and get a quarterback who can actually run play action. But the real star of the running backs was Dalvin Cook. He finished the first half with 153 yards and 2 touchdowns. But then he got slowed down by that Pittsburgh defense. 27 carries for 205 yards was his final stat line. But he was explosive in the first half. That shoulder injury that had him questionable it didn't seem to be bothering him as he was just gashing that Pittsburgh defense. However, Kirk Cousins struggled in this game. I think he's been pretty solid all season, personally. He threw his fourth and fifth interceptions of the season. He finished under 50% completion with 14 out of 31, 216 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He's been pretty good in most of their games this year, which I think has surprised some people. I don't know if he'll be back for next year when this contract runs out, but I could see him maybe getting a year or two deal with them. So I wanted to mention KJ Osborne. This kid is a stud for the Vikings. They continue to find great receivers. They scout receivers very well. Examples of this are Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, Justin Jefferson, and now KJ Osborne. Osborne was a 2020 round 5 pick, and he was actually pick 176. So this kid in college, he started off at the University of Buffalo. I watched a lot of his games when he played in Buffalo. He was he was explosive, but he wasn't the first option for this team. This is when Tyree Jackson, who's now a tight end, I believe, for the Eagles, and then Anthony Johnson, who was actually considered at that time to be a first-round pick before the season occurred, and he suffered many injuries. The UB team made it to the MAC championship game. They were widely regarded as one of the top Big 5 teams, or Power 5 teams. However, after the season, Osborne wasn't really involved in the offense too much, transferred to Miami, had a pretty solid career in Miami for a year, and then declared for the draft. And since then, in 2020, he only fielded a couple of punts, played special teams. That was his role. But then this year, he's been an absolute stud for this team. I think he's a great find, and especially now they've got 2 young receivers, Justin Jefferson and KJ Osborne, for when Adam Thielen inevitably leaves. He had 3 receptions for 83 yards this game and a touchdown, a long touchdown. I believe it was 62 yards. It was a great play by him. Outran the defender. There's a little push-off, but it was a great play regardless from him. This season, he's got 35 receptions, 412 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I think in the future, he's going to be a bigger part of this offense. And now that this offense, especially because I expect the Vikings bring in either a better quarterback or they stick with Cousins, who's still been very solid this year. This team could go places with this offense. Now that they have Osborne, they've got Jefferson, they've got Cook. There's a lot of options on this team. So in terms of the playoff pictures, for the Steelers, not great news. They dropped to 10th in the AFC. However, the Browns still have a game versus the Ravens. If they win that, they'll pass the Steelers. And if the Broncos beat the lowly Lions, who are coming off a win, the Broncos will pass the Steelers as well. As for the Vikings, though, they moved to 8th in the NFC playoff picture with the potential to pass Washington, I believe. Washington is playing the Cowboys at 6-6. Washington is clinging on to that 6th playoff spot, and the 49ers are clinging on to that 7th playoff spot at 6-6 as well. They play the Bengals this week. Behind the Vikings, you've got the Eagles. They're on a bye, so the Vikings can't be passed by the Eagles this week. The Panthers are 5-7. They're playing the Falcons. The Falcons are right behind the Panthers. Those teams I wouldn't really consider much of threats. The Panthers don't even have a quarterback, and then the Falcons don't have many weapons, and they don't have a defense at all. And right behind them are the Saints, who have the Jets this week, so a very winnable game. But then again, they don't have a quarterback as well. They don't have many weapons, especially with all the injuries. So the Vikings are in a very good position to make the playoffs. They've been in a bunch of one-score games, so they've been right there with top-tier teams. I expect them to make the playoffs. Kirk Cousins has been great, and especially Dalvin Cook in the playoffs is going to be a pain to stop. And you got Justin Jefferson, KJ Osborne, Adam Thielen. There's a lot to like about this Vikings team that's trending upwards. But it is a bit concerning that they were able to give up a 29-0 lead to one of the worst offenses in football. However, the Steelers did play great down the stretch. I think if for Steelers fans, especially with T.J. Watt's injury, which saw him leave in the end of the first half, come back in street clothes, he wasn't gonna play the rest of the game. I think it's time to start looking towards the future next year, because you're going to be moving on from Big Ben. Obviously, Mason Rudolph isn't your answer after he tied the game he had a tie with the Lions. And Dwayne Haskins, he probably won't be in the league much longer. So it's probably time to consider drafting another quarterback, because Big Ben's done after this year, or signing a quarterback if you believe this team is capable of making a deep run in the playoffs.